Nau mai, haere mai, tēnā koutou, ka nui te mihi kia koutou katoa. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. I would like to, please don't feel like you can't eat. I'm sure you can all multitask. I'd like to begin by acknowledging your CEO, Kirk Hope, and add also my acknowledgement of the pace at which he is moving with that moon boot, which is quite extraordinary. And especially, of course, acknowledging the sponsors of today's event, Fujitsu, Managing Director Michael Bull, and Vice President of Strategy, Marketing and Change Management, Megan. Thank you so much for your acknowledgement as well, and for acknowledging what will be probably one of the most poignant and important campaigns this government at present is running. Why has New Zealand been dropped off world maps? And as someone who comes from a town in New Zealand that is equally dropped off the New Zealand map, this is a double whammy for me. So you'll see more about that in the future. But I'm also grateful to be joined by my colleagues, Grant Robertson, Shane Jones, Fletcher Tabato and James Shaw here today. I acknowledge each of my ministerial colleagues. And we are here to show the importance that this government places on connecting with the business community, but not just connecting, listening, debating, moving forward. We are, after all, a positive government, a collaborative, stable government, one that knows that fixing long-term problems requires that collaboration, but it also requires fresh thinking and energy. And we are just 2 weeks away, of course, from Grant Robertson as our Minister of Finance from presenting the government's first budget. He's already planning the most important part of that announcement, his tie. But I will be using today, not to talk about that, but instead to talk a little bit about the framework that we have utilised in preparation for that budget, without, of course, giving too much away. I will outline our plans for the economy, how we want to partner with New Zealand business to bring about the kind of transformative change for the good of all New Zealanders that, in our view, we so desperately need. We did promise to be a government of change, because in our minds it is clear that a shift is needed. Now, change can require some adjustments, I know it. It can bring uncertainty, but it need not be that way. For the world is changing, and we know it is changing rapidly. We must therefore plan and adapt, or risk being left behind. Now, as business people, I'm sure you know that change actually can also bring great opportunity. And I'm also sure that you're aware that during change, it is important to always keep focus on what you want. So you are better able to seize the opportunity when it is presented. And my government is keen to do just that. We are committed to enabling a strong economy, to being fiscally responsible, and to providing certainty in this environment of change. We have a clear focus on sustainable economic development, supporting regional economies, increasing exports, lifting wages, and delivering greater fairness in our society. We have already spelled out our ambitious agenda to improve the well-being and living standards of New Zealanders through sustainable, productive, and inclusive growth. Now, we want to work with business and investors to get on with it and to deliver shared prosperity for all. My government is also committed and keen to future-proof our economy, to have both budget sustainability and environmental sustainability, to prepare people for climate change and the fact that 40% of today's jobs will not exist in a few decades. If we stay ahead of the curve, we need to develop a robust plan, and to do that, we have to work together. We said at the time, for instance, of the Future of Work Commission report, which Minister Grant Robertson was very much the driver of when we were in opposition, that a key principle for that particular piece of work was collaboration with stakeholders. That's how we built that report, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But it's also how we've chosen to operate since. A few weeks ago, I sat down with a group of business leaders and discussed their key issues, opportunities and concerns as they look to the future. A key theme was the future of their workforce and training, finding the skills they need and ensuring they are adaptable. We need to keep building our response to these challenges as a government. And that's why I'm pleased to announce today that we are establishing a tripartite Future of Work Forum, bringing together the three key partners in the economy, the government, Business New Zealand and the Council of Trade Unions. I am asking Minister Grant Robertson to work with Kirk Hope and Richard Wagstaff from the CTU to get this forum up and running. And I thank in advance Kirk and Richard for your support on this piece of work. Now, there is much that this forum can focus on based on the work that we have already done around the Commission. For example, technology. We need to do better at understanding and harnessing the new technologies that are emerging, such as artificial intelligence and robotics, and supporting workers to adjust to these new technologies as much as we support business to adjust to these technologies. No one has the same job for life anymore. We may well have several careers, so it's vital that workers are equipped with the foundation skills that will enable them to transition to other careers, that our school leavers are easily able to transition from school to work, and equally, so we have an education and training system that readily responds to changing skills requirements. We also know that a low-carbon economy is our future if we're to meet the challenges and opportunities that climate change presents, but also safeguard our community and country. They will also impact on workplaces, so we need to make sure that we're supporting workers and industries in making that just transition to that low-carbon future. And finally, the productivity challenge is another key area that we foresee this forum working on. We have started our commitment to lifting R&D spending, but we also need high-performing workplaces that provide flexible environments and that are responsive to new ways of working. Over coming months, we'll do some further thinking on the themes that will inform the key work areas for the forum. But ultimately, the forum will be focused on helping us shape the policies we'll need so workers and businesses can be equipped to adapt to the rapidly changing nature of work. We know the challenge is coming, and we need to be ready, and together, I am hoping that we can support one another through these issues. And most importantly, also avoid the mistakes of the past, where, for instance, economic shocks have damaged communities up and down New Zealand. That is also why we have tasked the Ministry of Business Innovation to work on our Just Transitions program so that we can prepare now. A strong and resilient economy is our ultimate aim. Business can be assured that this government will support those also who produce goods and services, export and provide decent jobs for New Zealanders. We are a government that is in favour of trade. Not only are we in favour of trade, we are actively pursuing trade opportunities on behalf of New Zealand and New Zealanders. We want to be outward looking. We want to make sure that we deliver and support those who are delivering on people's basic needs as exporters. We understand the need for security. We're also staying true to our guiding principles for open borders, free trade and international responsibility. The government that I have the privilege of leading is determined to prove that it's possible to have a trade agenda that is both progressive and inclusive. Now, we're not alone in wanting a new approach to trade agreements. On my recent visit to Europe, both President Macron and Chancellor Merkel of Germany underscored to me the need for FTAs that have a broader scope, particularly President Macron. Ultimately, it's how we can build wider public support for these agreements and ensure that they are enduring. We have recently embarked on a consultation process with the public on our new Trade for All agenda, so that we can build consensus for the framework we take into future FTA negotiations. And we're doing that because we've learned from some of the lessons of the past. Now, we already have some runs on the board in this regard. The reworked Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, don't blame us for the title, which was recently signed, will significantly improve New Zealand's access to a wider range of export markets, especially Japan in particular, pointing to a brighter future for New Zealand's exporters. The benefits of this deal are so clear that there is now a much wider interest from other countries to potentially joining this deal. This government knows what we want. We will encourage the economy to flourish, but not at the expense of damaging our sovereignty, our natural resources, or people's well-being. But we know that we can balance all of that through our trade agenda. Our plans have been spelled out from the beginning in the speech from the throne, in the first 100 days plan, and very soon you will see a little bit more detail around our first budget. Our first budget will be presented in just 2 weeks, on Thursday, May 17. So what will you likely see in it? You will see a clear plan to build a robust and more resilient economy. You will see a strong focus on delivering economic growth, on running sustainable surpluses and reducing net debt as a proportion of GDP. We know that we have to live within our means, and we will. At the same time, though, we are ambitious. We want to lift productivity, education, research and development, and address skill shortages. This will involve increases in both public investment as well as incentives for business. You will see a clear commitment to investing in the critical services we rely on and addressing areas of neglect. Now, I'm sure everyone here is aware that sometimes more investment is required. This government will make targeted investments to address, in particular, our social and our infrastructure deficits. The critical public services we rely on, such as transport, health, housing and education, must be adequately funded so they function well. And it is time to acknowledge that public services are under pressure. Planned growth, or unplanned growth as the case may be, has left roads congested and our cities crowded, while our regions certainly have the sentiment and reality that they have been left behind. We will improve public infrastructure and access to critical core services. There will be significant investments in these areas in this year's budget. You will have already heard about some of our plans for investment in transport. In particular, if I'm to give you an example, together with Auckland City Council, we've recently unveiled a record investment of about $28 billion under a new 10-year funding package aimed at unclogging our biggest city. We now have an overarching 30-year blueprint for tackling Auckland's transport issues, which many of you will know and have experienced, and it is a nightmare. About $8.4 billion will go into the construction of a rapid transit network featuring light rail, while about $940 million will go towards heavy rail improvements. This is expected to allow for the development, ultimately, of 124,000 additional homes across the Auckland region, with another 30,000 homes being able to be built in greenfield sites. Now, this is a huge civil construction project with a detailed and fully costed plan. Clearly, we can't keep growing our population and not put the money into infrastructure to support it. And we also cannot do it alone. In order to finance and deliver these projects, we will need to work with infrastructure partners. And the regions need not fear that they will be neglected. As someone who grew up in small town New Zealand, this is something I am particularly mindful of, as is our champion for the regions, the Honourable Shane Jones. We have committed $1 billion per annum towards the new Provincial Growth Fund, and over coming months there will be more detail around how this spending will continue to be targeted, and that's on top of the announcements that we've already made. After all, nearly half of us live outside our main cities, and our provinces also need to thrive if New Zealand is to do well. The Provincial Growth Fund aims to enhance economic development opportunities, create sustainable jobs, contribute to community well-being, lift the productivity potential of regions, and help meet New Zealand's climate change targets also. And I have to credit on both fronts for the Provincial Growth Fund, New Zealand First, and for the work around climate change, the Green Party, as members of this government. We are aware, though, that all these issues can't be solved with just one budget. One budget cannot fix all of the systemic issues, but this is the first of 3 budgets, at least 3 guaranteed budgets, by this government, and we're confident of seeing some real improvements in that time. We believe we're getting the balance right to support all New Zealanders to get ahead, but also to have confidence in the future, and to have confidence that this will be a government that does not plan on 3-year cycles, but on 30-year cycles. Confidence in the future certainly helps as well. And that, of course, is often an issue of perception. The perceptions you have determine your actions, whether you invest, whether you export, whether you take risks. It can also determine how you feel about things, like the government. Whether or not our perceptions are accurate is another question. Our perceptions are often influenced by our beliefs in general or our assumptions. Now, we all know that reported business confidence levels reflect this. I know it perhaps more than most. I've been known to speak openly about the reports I read of business confidence surveys. It's the elephant in the room, and I am quite happy to point directly at it. I know the perceptions we face, but I will always focus on improving New Zealand's reality with the goal that perception will then eventually reflect that reality. And the reality is good. The IMF, following its annual visit this month, said New Zealand has a favourable outlook with strong annual economic activity expected, and our fiscal, monetary and prudential policy settings are appropriate. The major credit rating agencies recently positively reviewed this government's economic plans and priorities. We are making steady progress. We've got record high terms of trade and a positive outlook for future incomes. Over the next 4 years, economic growth is set to remain strong, averaging 3%. Unemployment is forecast to fall to the government's 4% target, and wages are forecast to rise on average by more than 3% annually. I note too that official figures released yesterday show unemployment in the March quarter has fallen to its lowest level since December 2008 at 4.4%. We are in good shape. The budget policy statement and the Treasury's half-yearly economic and fiscal update show we can deliver our promises while running sustainable surpluses and paying down debt. I can assure you as well that Grant Robertson and this government takes the budget responsibility rules seriously. These mean we will operate budget surpluses, bar significant events like a global financial crisis or an earthquake. We will get net Crown debt to 20%. Crown spending will sit roughly at 30% of GDP, and at the same time, we will also invest in the infrastructure that we need. So business can be confident in this government, and I'm determined to prove that. Surveys show that businesses are actually feeling pretty good about their own activity. I look forward to hearing that same level of confidence expressed about the economy as a whole. It is important, though, to see clearly. We do not want to view the world as worse or as better than it is, but to see things as they are. On that score, how we measure success is important. In the past, we have used economic growth as a sign of success, and yet A generation of New Zealanders can no longer afford a home. Some of our kids are growing up living in cars. Our levels of child poverty and homelessness in this country are much too high, and it's not how we see ourselves. We all want a strong economy, but why do we want it? What is it for? It is vital that we remember the true purpose of having a strong economy is for all of us to have better lives and to thrive. The centre of our work as a government will always be the well-being of people. For that is absolutely the purpose and why we are here to serve. Surely that is also the purpose of business. Just think about why you first entered into the sector or business that you find yourself in, or indeed invested. What were you looking for? I'm sure you wanted to improve your well-being and that of your family, and perhaps the community around you. We all, to a certain degree, have well-being as our common goal, and we must not lose sight of that purpose which underlies all that we do. That is why this government is making a formal change to move beyond narrow measures of economic growth and broaden the scope and definition of progress. We want to ensure that the budgets we produce are not just narrow fiscal documents which consider success only in financial terms. Next year, we will be the first nation in the world to report our annual progress against a range of measures and living standards framework which tracks the well-being of our people and our environment alongside the traditional measures of economic growth. The government sees this approach as a core element for future budgets, giving a more rounded measure of success and of how government policy is improving New Zealanders' well-being. The government's fiscal strategy then becomes the means to the end of supporting New Zealanders to having better lives. After all, if economic growth is not reflected in the well-being of your people, then what is it for? We're being really honest, though, that we can't do all of this alone. So my final ask is that you join us. We can make an enormous difference if we work together, and we should. Not just because I know we do have a set of shared goals, but because many hands make light work, and a problem shared is a problem halved. I know that together we can achieve the ambitious goals of this government and no doubt the ambitious goals of the business community. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.